Back to the channel. Today we're going to unravel some incredibly complex events in Genoa. Rumors are circulating around the Newman family, but what's the truth? In this video, I'll summarize the plot points that will be revealed in the next episode. Stay tuned to see what happens. Welcome back to our channel. Today is a fantastic day to dive deep into the latest drama unfolding in Genoa City. We have an absolutely explosive update for you regarding the Abbott family's darkest nightmare. Grab your favorite beverage, settle in, and let us unpack the terrifying twists that are about to rock the foundation of our favorite daytime drama. Young and the Restless spoilers. The narrative surrounding the Abbott family has plunged into an abyss of psychological terror, shifting from a mere kidnapping plot into a deeply disturbing exploration of obsession and sadism. Dr. Lawrence Markham was initially introduced as the clinical, calculating partner in Patty Williams's grand design to isolate and torment Diane Jenkins. He was supposed to be the fortified wall keeping the Abbott family at bay. However, as the days stretch into agonizing nights within the oppressive, heavily guarded walls of his estate, a new and far more sinister motivation has begun to fester within the doctor's mind. Markham is no longer just a rogue psychiatrist operating on the fringes of medical ethics for financial gain or professional curiosity. He has developed a deeply perverted, twisting jealousy regarding Patty's all-consuming, historical obsession with Jack Abbott. For decades, Patty's mind has been a labyrinth of delusions, with Jack sitting squarely at the center of her fractured universe. Markham, observing this relentless, unwavering devotion up close, has grown fiercely envious. He has begun to feel sidelined, reduced to a mere henchman, in a narrative where he firmly believes he should be the leading man. This realization marks a terrifying turning point in the storyline, transforming Markham from a hired captor into a deeply invested, unpredictable lunatic who desires nothing more than to completely eradicate Jack's presence and claim Patty's twisted heart exclusively for himself. The storyline accelerates into high gear when Markham decides to flip the script entirely, taking matters into his own dangerous hands. Operating entirely behind Patty's back, or perhaps subtly manipulating her fractured perception of reality to suit his needs, Markham reaches out directly to Jack Abbott with a chilling, non-negotiable ultimatum. The Abbott patriarch, already isolated, desperate, and stripped of his family's trust, after his previous strategic trap for Patty disastrously backfired, is given a set of horrifying instructions. He must come to Markham's secluded, fortress-like home absolutely alone to negotiate a hostage exchange for his beloved wife, Diane, and his courageous son, Kyle. Jack is acutely aware of the immense danger this entails. He knows that stepping into the lion's den without the backing of the Genoa City Police Department, without Detective James Burrow, or without his usual corporate and strategic support is tantamount to a suicide mission. Yet, the paralyzing guilt of knowing that both his wife and son are suffering behind those locked doors leaves Jack with zero alternatives. The solitary drive to the estate is painted with an atmosphere of suffocating dread, every mile bringing Jack closer to an agonizing confrontation that will test the very limits of his sanity, his endurance, and his soul. Upon arriving at the heavily fortified estate, Jack is immediately stripped of his usual Abbott swagger and corporate authority. The grand mahogany doors of Markham's home do not open to reveal a civilized negotiation table. Instead, they serve as the gateway to a meticulously designed house of horrors. As Jack steps into the dimly lit foyer, the oppressive silence is shattered by the chilling, clinical calmness of Dr. Lawrence Markham. It is in this exact, heart-stopping moment that Jack Abbott realizes the catastrophic magnitude of his miscalculation. He had prepared himself to negotiate with Patty, to use their shared traumatic history to appeal to whatever shred of humanity or misguided love she had left. He had assumed Markham was merely a greedy professional holding the keys. But as Markham's eyes gleam with a sadistic, perverted hunger, Jack comprehends the horrific truth. Markham does not want Jack's money, nor does he care about Jabot's corporate influence. He wants Jack's absolute, humiliating destruction. He wants to literally and metaphorically, replaced Jack in Patty's heart, establishing himself as the ultimate authority and the only man worthy of her unhinged, eternal devotion. And here is the shocking plot twist that will leave viewers breathless and clutching the edge of their seats. Markham has absolutely no intention of conducting a fair or equitable hostage exchange. Instead, he violently pulls Jack into a horrifying psychological torture game, utilizing the most agonizing leverage imaginable to a father. Jack is forcibly restrained in a viewing room, a space designed specifically for psychological torment and observation. The heavy curtains are pulled back, or a high-definition monitor is switched on, revealing a sight that shatters Jack's heart into a million irreparable pieces. Kyle Abbott, the golden boy of the Abbott dynasty who bravely stormed this house to save his mother, is now bound, battered, and at the absolute mercy of Markham's sadistic whims. Markham lays out the rules of this demonic game with chilling precision and a terrifying smile. Every single time Jack attempts to speak to Patty, every time he tries to break through her thick wall of delusions and awaken her to the reality of Markham's monstrosity, Kyle will pay the ultimate price in blood and physical agony. It is a masterclass in psychological warfare, forcing a desperate father to choose between saving his family through reason and watching his only son endure unspeakable physical torment. The scenes that follow are destined to be some of the most emotionally grueling and difficult to watch in the entire history of The Young and the Restless. Kyle Abbott is now reduced to a helpless pawn in a sick, twisted love triangle between his father, a historically unstable woman, and a rogue psychiatrist with a god complex. Markham's methods of torture are deliberate, highly calculated to inflict maximum pain without immediately ending Kyle's life, ensuring that Jack's suffering is prolonged to an excruciating, unbearable degree. Diane Jenkins, presumably locked away in a nearby room within the compound, is forced to endure the muffled sounds of her son's agony, adding another layer of profound, suffocating tragedy to the unfolding nightmare. Jack sits in the viewing room, his knuckles turning white as he strains against his restraints, his breath catching in his throat. He desperately tries to speak, to beg Patty to see reason, to remind her of the innocent boy Kyle once was, but the exact moment the words leave his lips, Markham signals for the torment to continue. The sheer brutality of the situation paralyzes Jack, trapping him in a cruel paradox where his voice, historically his greatest weapon in boardrooms and relationships, is now the direct trigger for his son's immense suffering. Meanwhile, Patty Williams wanders through this nightmare scenario enveloped in a thick, impenetrable fog of her own romantic delusions. Viewers will be left questioning every interaction. Does Patty fully comprehend the extent of Markham's sadism? Or has the doctor so thoroughly manipulated her medications and her environment that she genuinely believes this is all a necessary, justified step toward her ultimate reunion with Jack? Patty's historical obsession with Jack has driven her to commit unspeakable acts in the past, from shooting Victor Newman to terrorizing the entire Abbott clan. But here, in Markham's house, she is both the orchestrator of the kidnapping and the unwitting prize in a terrifying contest of male dominance. Jack looks deep into Patty's eyes, desperately searching for a flicker of the woman he once knew, the woman who, despite her madness, possessed a twisted sense of loyalty. But he finds nothing but a chilling emptiness, a void that Markham is eagerly filling with his own perverted, controlling narrative. Patty smiles at Jack, perhaps believing that his presence in the house is a romantic victory, completely oblivious to the blood being spilled in the adjacent room to secure her undivided affection. Just when the audience thinks the situation cannot possibly deteriorate any further, another major question arises that shifts the entire dynamic of the storyline. How much more trauma can Jack Abbott endure before his mind completely and irreversibly snaps? For decades, Jack has been the resilient, unshakable patriarch, the man who bounced back from corporate ruin, severe addiction, and countless romantic tragedies. He has always relied on his sharp intellect, his silver tongue, and his legendary confidence to navigate his way out of the darkest corners of Genoa City. But as he is forced to watch Kyle writhe in pain, that legendary confidence evaporates into the cold, sterile air of Markham's estate. The realization hits Jack with the devastating force of a freight train. He is not negotiating with one rational mind, nor is he merely managing Patty's familiar brand of crazy. He is trapped in a locked compound, entirely at the mercy of two distinct, overlapping lunatics. Markham's cold, calculated sadism perfectly complements Patty's erratic, passionate delusions, creating an impenetrable fortress of insanity that Jack's logic and wealth simply cannot pierce. The dynamic between Markham and Patty becomes the central, terrifying axis of Jack's torment. Markham plays the role of the devoted, understanding caretaker, whispering sweet, validating lies into Patty's ear, constantly reinforcing her belief that Jack has treated her terribly and that only Markham truly understands her beautiful soul. He uses Kyle's torture not just to punish Jack, but to elevate his own status in Patty's eyes, presenting himself as the strong, decisive protector who is finally bringing the arrogant Jack Abbott to his knees. Jack, bound tightly to his chair, is forced to witness this grotesque, unsettling courtship. He sees how Markham's hands linger possessively on Patty's shoulders, how his eyes gleam with a territorial fury whenever Patty looks at Jack with lingering affection. The psychological layers of this confrontation are incredibly dense, weaving together decades of show history with a fresh, terrifying threat. Jack understands that to defeat Markham, he must somehow sever the doctor's psychological hold over Patty, but doing so will instantly trigger another wave of agonizing pain for his son. It is a flawless, inescapable checkmate designed to break his spirit. Despite the immense physical and emotional toll, Kyle Abbott's resilience shines through the darkness, adding a heartbreaking note of heroism to the bleak narrative. Even as he endures Markham's cruel, calculated punishments, Kyle's eyes meet his father's through the glass or the monitor, silently pleading with Jack not to surrender his dignity. Kyle's journey from a privileged, sometimes arrogant executive to a battered, selfless hostage highlights the immense growth of his character. He walked into this nightmare alone to save Diane, driven by a pure, unadulterated love for his mother. Now, he is bearing the brunt of a madman's jealousy to protect his father's sanity. The bond between the Abbott men is tested in the absolute crucible of Markham's cruelty, and every drop of sweat and blood sheds light on the deep, unbreakable ties that define their family legacy. But resilience alone cannot break steel chains, and the harsh reality of their captivity continues to loom over them like an executioner's blade, threatening to end their lineage entirely. As the hours drag on into an endless night, a new, shocking variable enters the equation that could change everything. What is happening with Diane Jenkins while her husband and son are being subjected to this psychological meat grinder? Diane, known for her own extensive history of manipulation, cunning, and survival, is not one to simply wait in the shadows for a rescue that may never come. Locked away in another wing of the house, the muffled sounds of Jack's desperate pleas and Kyle's suffering begin to ignite a fierce, unstoppable maternal rage within her. Diane has faked her own death, navigated the treacherous waters of the Genoa City elite, and clawed her way back to respectability against all odds. Now, stripped of her glamour, her wealth, and her resources, she must rely entirely on her primal instincts. Will Diane find a way to escape her heavy restraints? Will she become the unexpected, lethal wild card in Markham's meticulously planned game? The possibility of Diane breaking free and turning the tables on her captors adds a thrilling, unpredictable layer of suspense to the storyline, keeping viewers on the absolute edge of their seats. Dr. Lawrence Markham's endgame becomes increasingly, terrifyingly clear as the psychological torture reaches its crescendo. He does not simply want to kill Jack Abbott. Death would be far too merciful, too quick an end for the man who has occupied Patty's heart for so many years. Markham wants to break Jack completely, dismantling his psyche piece by piece. He wants to reduce the proud, towering CEO of Jabot Cosmetics to a weeping, shattered shell of a man, forcing him to grovel at Patty's feet and confess his absolute unworthiness. Markham firmly believes that once Jack is thoroughly humiliated and destroyed in front of Patty, her lifelong obsession will finally shatter, leaving a massive emotional void that Markham is perfectly positioned to fill. This perverted, twisted logic drives every single action Markham takes, making him one of the most terrifying, complex, and deeply disturbed villains to grace the screens of The Young and the Restless in recent memory. He is a monster cloaked in medical authority, utilizing his intimate knowledge of the human mind to inflict maximum targeted trauma on a family that has already endured so much. The despair within the Abbott family reaches an all-time high, creating a suffocating atmosphere of hopelessness. Back in Genoa City, Tracy Abbott and Billy Abbott are left completely in the dark, entirely unaware of the unspeakable horrors unfolding at the Markham estate. Tracy, who had previously condemned Jack after hearing Patty's manipulated audio recordings, is now grappling with a profound, gnawing sense of unease. The silence from her brother is deafening, and the terrifying realization that she may have misjudged the severity of Patty's threat begins to dawn on her. Billy, currently spiraling in his own massive public meltdown and engaging in ruthless corporate warfare against Kane Ashby and Lily Winters, is far too consumed by his own personal demons to notice Jack's absence or launch a rescue mission. Jack, Kyle, and Diane are truly on their own, completely isolated from the vast wealth, legal power, and influence that usually protects their family from harm. This isolation amplifies the sheer terror of the situation, emphasizing that in Markham's house, money and status are utterly meaningless. The only currency that matters is pain, and Markham is collecting it with ruthless, terrifying efficiency. As the narrative hurtles toward a seemingly inevitable tragic climax, the tension is palpable and suffocating. Jack Abbott is teetering on the very edge of his psychological breaking point. The sight of Kyle's ongoing suffering is rapidly eroding his resolve, chipping away at the iron will that has defined his character for decades. He looks at Patty, lost in her romantic delusions, and then at Markham, glowing with sadistic, perverted triumph, and realizes that hope is a luxury he can no longer afford to entertain. The psychological game is stripped him bare, leaving him with a horrifying, impossible choice. Continue to fight and watch his